Hello everyone, it's me, Vivi, and welcome to the ending of Kingdom Hearts Union Cross. Before we dive into the summary, let's go over a few reminders. KH Union Cross Japan has ended its service. The app has now gone offline, meaning you can no longer play the game online. You can only customize your character and watch all the cutscenes in theater mode. As for the global version, that one will be going offline on June 29th. Originally, the app was planned to go offline earlier for both the Japanese version and global, but since the finale got extended into 2 parts, they simply pushed it back. Now, the story of Union Cross, the actual story itself, ended on May 31st in Japan. As for global, the story ended on June 9th. For unknown reasons, people were expecting both versions to have their stories drop at the same time, but it didn't happen and we're not too sure why. For this video, we'll be going over the global official English translation. As for what this means for Dark Road, it currently cannot be played in Japan with version 4.4.0. Dark Road will resume offline in late September with version 5.0.0, with fully unlocked adventure for both Japanese and global versions. So with that information out of the way, let's dive into the story itself. Well, the ending in this case. The first scene, we have the Master of Masters and Luxu. The Master explains to Luxu there's no way to win against the darkness. Everything that's happened in the Kingdom Hearts Union saga, it was all planned and intentional. It's not that it was destined per se, but the Master of Masters made sure that all these things would go his way. What this means? Well, the Keyblade War, Data Daybreak Town, it was all bait, to keep it short. Before Luxu leaves to pursue his role, the Master has a few things to add. Things that finally make it clear that everything that's happened was in the Master of Masters' favor. The fight with darkness has lasted for a very long time, explains the Master. Darkness got rid of its form. Darkness without a form attacks people's hearts. The Master lost comrades due to the nature of these darknesses. Darkness without a form loses its will. Darkness began as 13 darknesses. From all these darknesses came the birth of Heartless. Now, some darknesses still didn't have a form, were not turned to Heartless, but did develop this sense of will, yearning to take over strong hearts. Now this is where everything starts to connect. Darkness without a form cannot be defeated. So with that, the Master trained 5 Foretellers. 5 bodies with strong hearts. Hearts able to withstand the darkness without being consumed by it. Strong vessels for these darknesses to be defeated in. If darkness has a form, it can be defeated. Talk about scapegoat. Literally. In a religious setting, scapegoat symbolizes the sins of men. All these sins are laid upon a goat and sent to escape. Now, one of these goats was sacrificed while the other was led out into the wilderness. So in this case, the Master planning for darkness to take over the Foretellers and themselves? Well, that's more of a goat being sacrificed, wouldn't you say? The Master calls this war. That's how he justifies what's happening. So with 13 darknesses at play, 7 which include the Foretellers, the Master of Masters, and Luxu, they will all be used as vessels. Well, more like trap them since their hearts are strong enough to withstand it. So now we really do wonder what happened to Ava since she never appeared in the epilogue of Kingdom Hearts 3. After all, the Master does say, we all go our separate ways and see where we end up. So Ava wound up somewhere, but we're just unaware as of right now. The whole thing about Traitor in the Book of Prophecies, it was all according to plan. It was bait, planting fear and doubt, making these people susceptible to being taken over by darkness. Literal bait? 7 out of 13 darknesses. That leaves us with 6. Come to think of it, the whole 7 dark pieces in this scene makes a lot more sense now. We'll eventually get to face these 7 darknesses, the Foretellers, Luxu, and the Master of Masters. Well, that's what it alludes to for now. The only light piece we have is Sora, Sora's crown. So back to what I was saying. 6 darknesses left out of 13. The Master planned for the 5 to take over the new Union leaders, and for the last one, you know, make sure it's left behind, stuck in this world. From the scenes we have later, that's not what really happens. Now, the Master warns Luxu not to let his feelings take over and, cause him to do anything that's not part of the plan, basically. The Master feels this isn't a heroic tale. It's by honoring the dignity of those with hearts. He feels he's not sacrificing anyone, and that he has a safety plan. Naturally, that'd be hard to believe for Luxu. What the Master was hinting at, probably, by the words safety plan, the data world being one of them. To safeguard the dandelions, yeah, the Keyblade War happens, but others, the dandelions, remain safe in a data version of Daybreak Town. So what happens in that data version, we have 5 Union leaders, who are planned to become vessels, according to the Master. You know, keep them safe, as to harbor those 5 darknesses eventually. But it doesn't really go his way. The scene ends with the Master calling Luxu the traitor. I think traitor in this scene is simply literal. Not the traitor we had in the book, but traitor as in the Master feels that Luxu will not listen. And we already got a sense of that when Luxu encountered one of the darknesses in the real Daybreak Town. So we got 6 darknesses left. One followed Maleficent to the real world, the one that's talking to Luxu in this scene. As for the other 5, one took over Ven. Well, technically Ven decided to merge with one of the darknesses as to defeat it with a form. If they're formless, they cannot be defeated. As for the remaining 4, they remain trapped in the data world. We'll look at that later on in the video. Next scene. In this scene, we have the ones who traveled to real Daybreak Town. As you can see, 2 lifeboats already missing. One was used by Maleficent, and the other was used to send away this mysterious character in a white blanket. This scene with Luxu right here. Perhaps it's Strelitzia at this point. Is it her nobody, or is it a data recreation of her looking back at this scene where the gang discussed the possibility of their data versions existing in the data world? Who knows, really? In this scene, Brain wonders if he can figure out a way to bring the rest of the crew here. At least that's one of the things he believes he can accomplish. But what about the dandelions, you might ask? Well, I take it Brain is going with the notion that the dandelions who remain behind in the data world, well, if the world of data falls to darkness, the dandelions will simply fall asleep. This is something Brain learned from Ava. When a world falls to darkness, it falls asleep. However, that's not what's going to happen, sadly, and we'll look at that later. So back to the crew I was speaking of. We have Elrena, Lauriam, and Brain in the real Daybreak Town. In the data version, we have the dandelions who are not on screen, Player, Ephemer, and Scald. So Brain's plan, in more detail, send Lauriam and Elrena on their way, and then send 2 lifeboats back to the data Daybreak Town so that Player, Ephemer, and Scald can make it back. If you recall, in the data version of Daybreak, there were originally 7 lifeboats. One got damaged when Lauriam dealt with Maleficent, the other Maleficent used to travel from Data to real Daybreak Town to pretty much the Kingdom Hearts 2 timeline afterwards. So we got 5 lifeboats left in Data. If 4 were sent here in the real Daybreak Town, that's 4 out of 5. 1 lifeboat remains in the Data world. If he sends 2, that's 3 lifeboats in the Data world for Player, Ephemer, and Scald. However, it doesn't go that way, and you'll understand soon. Brain sending off Lauriam, he believes it's a chance given by Ephemer to keep hope and light alive, and that he's passing it on to him. Brain doesn't know when or where he'll end up. Yup, that's the lifeboats for ya. Brain tells Lauriam that his hope to find Strelitzia should be his waypoint. Well, Data of his sister in this case. That will be his waypoint. That will guide him. As the trio embark on their mysterious journey, the world starts to crumble, and Luxu shows up. But then the scene transitions to the Data version of Daybreak Town. And here we are. We come back to Ephemer, Scald, and Player on the other side, aka the Data version. Their little heartfelt conversation, laughter, and all that comes to a halt. 4 darknesses show up. Alright, time to recapitulate. 13 darknesses from ancient times. 7 of them take part of the Foretellers, Luxu, and the Master of Masters. That's 7 darknesses out of 13. 6 out of 13 remain. 1 merged with Ven, remember. The other encountered Luxu in the real world. As for the remaining 4, well, you'll understand what happens in this scene right here. These 4 darknesses are not here to fight, but they do bring up what the darkness that encountered Ven told them. Infection. So what's happening here? These 4 darknesses want to escape this data world. If you recall, one of the 6 darknesses explained that they wound up in data. One exit with Maleficent, the one talking to Luxu from this past scene, so these 4 want to do the same. They too want to exit this data world to infect other worlds. So to try and get out of here, one darkness threatens the gang. Open the gates, or else. Or else they take over one of them. Ephemer wishes player takes the last lifeboat. And what happens here? Well, player pretends to have been influenced by darkness. It's not indicated here that player pretends to do what they're doing right now, but we'll see the player's intention in a later scene. Skald thinks they already had dealt with this darkness. I take it she's referring to the one merged with Ven. I mean, who else or what else could she be referring to, right? Ephemer flies across the room. Player demands to open a gate. Player succeeds at handling both Skald and Ephemer. Talk about strength. Ephemer, out of fear and for protection, sends player and all 4 darknesses someplace else in data. Before we get back to player, we go back to the scene where Brain encounters Luxu. Brain wonders who this guy in a black robe is. He gets totally surprised by the fact Luxu is even here. He thought he had disappeared a long time ago, even before the formation of these new unions. Brain confirms to Luxu that he is indeed a union leader, and Luxu realizes Brain is the only one left here. Not to get confused here. I was at first, to be honest. When Brain says 1 escaped and 2 remained in data, I mean he was referring to the union leaders, not just individuals. Elrena is not a union leader, for example, so the one who escaped or the one he was referring to would be Lauriam. As for the other 2 in the data version of Daybreak, that would be Ephemer and Skald. Now as the 5th one, that would be Ventus, kinda. Ventus was not really a union leader, it was Strelitzia originally. Darkness manipulated Ven into killing her and stealing her spot. Ven didn't have any recollection of that until the gang, well, Brain in this case, started questioning Ventus at a point. Brain then explains that the 2 remaining lifeboats will be sent back to the data world, so that player, Ephemer, and Skald can all escape. But you know, player is no longer part of the equation at this point. Brain's aware he's going to have to remain behind, so he feels he should wake up as many dandelions as possible. Sadly, this is where Luxu corrects him and tells him that the data world cannot wake dandelions once they're left behind. The data world merely acted as a cage for the darknesses, so sadly once data world falls to darkness, so does its inhabitants. Here Luxu re-explains that the lifeboats are incomplete. For one to have a successful travel, they need a medium and someone to remember them, aka memories. Without either of the 2, one cannot physically reform wherever it is they travel to. What's weird about the global official translation here, Luxu uses the word vessel instead of medium. I'm used to using the word medium. The word medium actually comes from the unofficial translation if you're curious. I feel medium makes more sense. I mean, the example with Maleficent, her medium in this case would be either her crow or her robe. Would an object in this case count as a vessel? The word itself, I mean, it's a weird way of putting it, isn't it? That's why I feel medium makes more sense. Luxu feels Brain is a smart kid and asks him, what is it that you want to do really? Luxu feels it's a shame that his lifetime falls this short. So we ask ourselves this, is Luxu planning to use Brain as a vessel here? Because from what we learned from the KH3 secret reports, he's been hopping from one vessel to another until he becomes Braig Zigbar. So what I believe is going to happen here, Luxu will make a deal. Since no more lifeboats left, Luxu will find a way to send Brain somewhere forward in time. So the way I feel this will happen, Luxu will take over Brain. Brain will remain as a heart, and will eventually be reformed somewhere in the future. Why am I saying this? Well, because of a scene we'll see later. However, one question remains. If there are no more lifeboats, how would Brain's heart even travel forward in time? Look, let's move on to the next scene before we try and answer that. In this scene, Ephemer and Skald realize 2 extra lifeboats appear. They use it. Ephemer stares at the lifeboat on the far left, which would have been meant for the player, who is now gone. The next scene, player wakes up and starts laughing knowing that these darknesses are that gullible. Here it is. This is where we realize that player was pretending. What player ends up doing, well, they entrap the darknesses here by sending them someplace else that lies in data perhaps. If this data world falls to darkness, everything falls with it. The next scene, Scald and Ephemer make it to the real world. They realize the world is falling to darkness. One thing that gets me confused here, why is data glitching in the real world? Maybe the computer is to blame, but it's still confusing. The point is, the duo realize it's dangerous, so they head back inside. As for the next scene, I believe this is an extended look at the scene we had a short while ago. Which, fun fact, Ray Chase, the actual voice, dubbed the Master of Masters here, just for fun. You can look it up. It's actually pretty cool. The scene which Ray Chase dubbed, that's the one where the Master discussed how his Keyblade serves as his medium and that Luxu plays the memories part. Yes, the Master of Masters travels forward in time, most likely using a lifeboat. That's what the previous scene was trying to entail. However, we don't know which lifeboat he wound up using because they all end up being used. And for now, the only way to travel forward in time is with the lifeboats. The whole mediums and memories thing, it's all tied to the logic of lifeboats. As for the recent scene, I love the fact the Master uses the word chessboard here. What chessboard comes to mind? The one where young Xehanort and Ericus were having a chess game. So this scene, the Master talks about how it's unfair for worlds to grow and still have darkness spread. Darkness says, well, we're friends, aren't we? The Master explains he wants some alone time here and there. Does friends in this case mean literally friends, or friends as in they keep sticking to his butt? I'm gonna go with the latter for now. Anyway, the way the Master remains neutral in this scene, the mere fact he's talking to darkness, says it all. His plan, as discussed in the beginning, have these darknesses take over them. There's no other reason to have the Master talk to darkness, knowing that his comrades lost their lives because of them. The Master wants to travel to a place where light nor darkness rules. This world we'd like to believe to be Quadratum, eventually. After all, he does meet young Xehanort at some point in time, before ending up in Quadratum. World of Fiction comes up. First instance of such term would be Melody of Memory. As I thought, what's being implied here? Not only do we have the realm of light and darkness, but a realm built from the imagination of people, hence fictional world or unreality. If you can imagine hard enough, you can make anything a reality. That's the nature of a fictional realm. This fictional world he speaks of is one he cannot even conceive. Wait, conceive a world? Well, remember how the Book of Prophecies would conjure future worlds? Well, the Book of Prophecies was written thanks to his gazing eye, remember? So yeah, in a way the Master has the power to conceive a world. Coincidentally, the Master says almost the same exact words as Ansem in Melody of Memory, where voices can't reach. The mere fact Ansem thought of the words fiction and unreality makes it seem like he's heard of such nature before, but he just doesn't know much about it. In the Japanese version of this scene, instead of a blank line, we have a reference note, a typographic mark used in Japanese, Chinese, and Korean writing. What it's used for, well, to bring attention to a certain idea. Guess it's Nomura's fancy way of referring to Quadratum, which is a fictional world in this case. I guess this reference mark wants to lead us towards the idea of fiction. What the Master's referring to here is a fictional realm, simply. Next scene. Scald and Ephemer enter the lifeboats again. Scald is glad she's not alone to witness the end. She thanks him for being right by her side, for now. Ephemer remembers player and that's it. The world crumbles and they both exit. As for the next scene, it caused a surge of emotion within the community. The data world is no more. All dandelions, including the player, well, just the dandelions in this case, their hearts enter their Chirithes, where they sleep and remain protected forever. When that happens, Chirithes turn into Dream Eaters we know. You know, Dream Drop Distance. Yeah, no wonder this scene hit our hearts. There's a little misconception in this scene. The dandelions themselves don't become Dream Eaters. Instead, it's their Chirithes. Chirithes, who are already spirit Dream Eaters by nature. When they fall asleep, aka death in this case, Chirithes become their protectors. And now, we enter a new concept, reincarnation, at least looking at player. If one decides not to sleep, aka move on spiritually, their hearts melt into a new one. And guess what? That's what the player wishes to do. So right there, we quickly transition to this scene, which is a mystery. We'd like to believe that player gets reincarnated as Xehanort. Yeah, crazy, ain't it? Right off the bat. I don't think that's Scald. Why would Xehanort's mom even let Xehanort be taken away? I wonder. As for why this person doesn't look like Scald to me, well, the hair looks alike, yes, I can admit that, but the eyes don't match. Maybe you might think it's just an oversight looking at the eye color, but not just that. I just strongly personally believe that Scald is Subject X, the one who remembers 4 friends and a key. Secret report number 1 in KH3. That key Subject X is referring to is most likely the Master's Defender, which Brain passed on to Ephemer. By the way, this is Scala Ad Caelum. We find out about this later on. At least the place, the setting and all, it matches. The setting we'll see afterwards. As for the mystery robe person, if this were old Ephemer, why would they hide his face? Right? Here's what I think. This is Luxu using someone as a vessel. This vessel has reached its limit and the body simply collapses. Why would Luxu want to be strongly tied to baby Xehanort? Why keep an eye on him? Well, simply because he thinks he's the one. Report 12 in KH3, Unknown aka Luxu believes someone will reenact the Keyblade War. One way or another, Luxu feels this boy in particular will grow up to accomplish that. Other than that, I really don't know who this mystery person is. It could be someone we'll eventually know about more in the future, but for now, I believe this is simply Luxu moving on to another vessel. Now as for the scene in Dark Road, Xehanort dreaming up the player, it makes sense now. Player is Xehanort reborn as a new heart. So does this mean Ephemer decided to melt into a new heart as well? AKA Sora in this case, the scene in Kingdom Hearts 3? Does reincarnation even do that? You seeing the ghost of your past life. And what even happened to Ephemer? Well, we'll dive into that very shortly. What we learned here, Xehanort does in fact originate from Scala, but grew up on Destiny Islands, and then he gets sent back to Scala by his future self. This is a scene from Dark Road's beginning, if you weren't aware. It's not over yet, the player says. That's how the scene transitions. Player's heart just floats away and is reborn into Xehanort, we believe. Alrighty, Ephemer. I believe his lifeboat simply malfunctioned. He just wound up not even time traveling. Or maybe he did, but before the creation of Scala. So pretty much he maybe slightly traveled forward in time. If he did really travel, then the question is, who remembered him and what's his medium? How did he reform himself? Hard one, ain't it? So I don't think it's Luxu, as he's never seen Ephemer in person, you know, the memories part. Easy guess here is the lifeboat malfunctioned. He simply passed out in it and wakes up to a completely destroyed Daybreak Town. As for the scene I showed previously, well, it happens straight after Ephemer wakes up in the lifeboat. What happens in the next coming scenes, we get to see where our crew ended up. Maleficent in the Kingdom Hearts 2 timeline. Lauriam in the Dwarf Woodlands. Flowers, get it? His element? Elrena in, I believe, Enchanted Dominion or maybe Mount Olympus? I take it it's the former, but same thing here, lightning. Get it? It's her element. Ventus, the Keyblade Graveyard, where I believe Xehanort finds him. The thing that makes us scratch our heads over. How the heck did these three come back? How did they get reformed? What were their mediums and memories? Who remembered these guys? Me thinks Subject X could be the case. Although X's memories were very faint, it could have been enough for them to reform themselves. Of course, this is assuming that Lauriam and Elrena wound up in the timeline where Subject X is found and is being studied on. In this case, we believe Subject X to be none other than Scald. And again, their mediums, how did Elrena and Lauriam reform? We can only guess at this point. Remember when Brain told Lauriam to pretty much continue believing in his sister's data? That perhaps acted as his medium, his waypoint. Since Elrena had this closeness with Lauriam, that too could have caused a domino effect, which could explain how she got reformed. I'm maybe reaching here, the Field of Flowers. Lauriam dreamt up his sister once. Flowers could be the medium here. Like I said, they're mediums, I mean, it could be anything. It's completely up in the air. I know, Ventus's name translates to wind. Yes, he wakes up in a windy area, I know. But I don't think it really means much here. Then we have this scene. Luxu reveals his face, and he looks like Brain. My guess is he used Brain as a vessel, allowed Brain's heart to travel forward in time, where it could reform itself as Brain. So basically we are dealing with two brains. Before we see our Brain again, Luxu says to himself, "May your heart be your guiding key." You might say, wait, wasn't this scene in back cover as well? Well, the one we had in back cover, it was never specified when the scene took place. It could literally be much later down the line. However, there is one difference. In back cover, he says, "May my heart be my guiding key." Either an error, I know that sounds funny when it comes to Kingdom Hearts, or it could be referring to how he sent Brain's heart away. As he says, "May your heart be your guiding key," he reveals himself having Brain's face. No, I don't think this is time travel where Brain was always Luxu, it's just too complex. Like I said, I feel like we're dealing with two brains. We have Brain/Luxu and Original Brain. Speaking of our Brain, he wakes up in Scala. Yep, I agree, Scala looks darker than usual. It could be the suburbs of Scala for all we know. There's a mysterious fella by the name Sigurd, who escorts Brain, who wakes up eventually. Fun fact, Sigurd is a reference to Old Norse mythology. Sigurd finds Brain's hat. I feel that's Brain's medium right there. One question, however, how did Brain's heart travel forward in time? Remember the lifeboat meant for the player? Seeing as how Brain was able to send 2 lifeboats back to the data world, it's possible the opposite can be done as well. Bring that one remaining lifeboat from data and then use it. Remember, Skald and Ephemer stepped outside for a moment. That one last lifeboat in the data world could have appeared during this specific moment. In and out, just like that, with our duo outside having no idea whatsoever. So what technically happened, Brain's heart was put in a lifeboat and sent to travel forward in time. If Darkness was able to exit the data world with Maleficent, I mean a heart itself can also be contained in a lifeboat and be sent away. In this case, the heart I'm referring to is Brain's. So with Brain's heart in the future, we move on to our next question. Who remembered Brain? Who played the role of memories? We feel his hat is his medium, but what about the memories part? There are 2 options. A. Luxu, who body hopped until Scala. He remembered Brain, simply. Or B. Ephemer. Ephemer turns out to be the founder of Scala Ad Caelum. How would Ephemer remember Brain in this case? Perhaps the Book of Prophecies or even the Master's Defender. Either of those 2 things could have triggered Ephemer's memories. This is assuming Ephemer slightly traveled forward in time using a lifeboat, which made him forget about his past. But that still leaves the question of Ephemer's medium. If Ephemer did end up slightly traveling forward in time, what's his medium and who remembered him? So yeah, again, like I said previously, I simply believe that Ephemer's lifeboat malfunctioned and he never time traveled. Yeah, and did I forget to mention, when you use a lifeboat to travel forward in time, you don't remember anything of your past. Yep, that's how a lifeboat works, at least for an unfinished lifeboat. So, if Ephemer's lifeboat simply malfunctioned, then the memories part, it's easy. Ephemer simply remembers Brain, and with his hat being the medium, Brain reformed himself. As for how Sigurd knows Brain or recognizes Brain, it could be due to the Book of Prophecies maybe. The Book of Prophecies was given to Ephemer by Brain, remember? So, by reading the Book of Prophecies, Ephemer knew this would happen. That knowledge got passed down somehow, and Brain wonders where the rest of his friends are. They're not here. They're all in different timelines. And looking back at Ephemer being the founder, he's deemed the first Keyblade master of this place. Brain says he was a good friend. And there's this picture floating around. This one hits. Seeing all those Chirithes before and after knowing what happened, yeah, it hits. And I believe this is it for the summary of the ending of Union Cross. I hope you enjoyed this one, folks, and if you have your own ideas, your own theories, don't be shy, leave it all in the comments section below. And as always, I've been Vivi, and thank you so much for watching.